watching Balkans in Europe and One Television and European Fund for the Balkans program from the European Parliament. I'm Ivana Dragicevic.
And I'm Borjan Jovanovski. Is there strength within the EU its institutions and member states to stop the erosion of fundamental democratic principles and values on which the European Union is founded?
European weaknesses fed a rise of xenophobic and racist acts and speeches. Some nation states, as Hungary and Poland, within their own national and nationalistic frameworks, eroding the European democratic values with no real mechanism within the Union to act, it seems.
On the subject of democratic backsliding within the EU, today we are talking with former ambassador Erwan Fouéré,
today
associate in European Center
for European Policy Studies. Yes.
Augustin Polokaj, correspondent for Jutarnji list from Brussels, and our colleague from
Sándor, Zsiros, Brussels
Croatia,
correspondent for Euronews from Hungary.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll start with Sándor. What's going on in Hungary? I think there it all started with Mr. Orban being called upon here to explain his views on immigrants, on death penalty, and he's still there. You have a fence. What's going on in your country?
Yes, Orban's position is very stable. He has a huge support, and to see the background of his so-called illiberal policies, we have to go back a little bit in time. After the fall of the communism, we had 20 years of transition, which was marked as a liberal free market democracy, but most of the population saw it as a tragedy, at least an economical side. The people in Hungary think that this period, during this period, they were robbed by foreign banks, foreign companies, and it was very obvious that sooner or later they will turn to a strong hand, which Orban, of course, he saw this.
Is there any opposition in Hungary? Because from the outside, we are neighbors in Croatia and Hungary. We cannot hear these voices if we don't, search for them very hard.
For the moment, there is a socialist party which is around 15%, so very small, and we have Jobbik, a radical far-right party, which is around 20%. So not much. No party would be able to govern if the government would collapse today.
And the non-governmental sector, media, we saw the hands on everything there.
It's not true. It's partly true. The government tries to influence media, but the media is still free. The two most watched TVs are private. One is the most watched is actually run by a German company, which wants to do business with the government, so they make a kind of self-censorship. Mm-hmm. But if they would like to criticize the government, they have the possibility to do it, but apparently they don't want.
We can't see Orban doing any step backward. How EU reacts so far on what's going on in Hungary? Mr. Fouéré.
Well, very weakly, unfortunately. I think we have been probably too complacent, taking for granted a lot of the basic democratic values that have been at the foundation of the European integration project since the beginning. And because we took them for granted, I think many people were quite shocked at the attack on these values by actions and decisions taken, notably, first of all, by the Hungarian government, but also by other leaders. Poland now is the most recent. And because of the weakness at the beginning and the failure to act, now there is a serious danger that if there is not a proper institutional response from the European Union to these attacks, that this will further weaken the European Union internally, but also externally, because how can we preach to those who want to join the European Union about media freedom, about democratic values, if there are countries within the European Union who are not respecting those values? So by doing that, they are weakening the European Union's power of transforming societies that want to join, like the Balkan countries, who are some of them negotiating, others waiting to join, and who are facing some very serious democratic problems.
As a journalist, what's your assessment about the reaction of the EU institutions about what's going on in Hungary?
Well, there was a reaction, but the reaction was too official from European Commission, for example. And Orban, I've seen Orban for years because he comes to the summits and there was a successful Hungarian presidency. He did an excellent job in favor of Croatia. Maybe without him, Croatia wouldn't be in EU today. So he is a very hard-working politician, but he doesn't care what people outside Hungary think. If his economy is going well, he has support of the people and he respects the law. He always...
the law, but we are talking about some basic, fundamental values.
Which are also in the law and in some constitutions. And
exactly, but he points to the fact that tell me where I am in breach on the law. Like for the fences, when Hungary started to build the fence, everybody jumped saying this is inhumane, this is not a European value. But when we asked in the Commission, what would you do? Is Hungary right to do so? The answer was yes. It was not straight yes, but by answering, every country, every member state has a right and duty to decide which way is the best to protect external borders of Schengen or of EU. And then Orban said, exactly, that's what I'm doing. This is the best way. You see, there are no refugees coming through Hungary anymore. So tell me, what is the other way? That's why they are misusing this issue. And Orban even comes and tells that I'm coming here like in the mini summit with the Western Balkan leaders. I was almost joking when I asked him, why are you here? He said, exactly, I don't know. I'm here to give some advice if they want to listen, because he thinks that he found the best formula. The same with media issues. And now we have Poland after Hungary, and Poland is more important case. Maybe also I see that sometimes it's a too big political party solidarity. I think that European Parliament reacted faster in case of Poland than in case of Hungary, because Orban party is in EPP. And thanks to the votes for the Orban party, maybe also Juncker is today the president of the Commission.
Protected by EPP.
A little bit, at least in silence.
How the liberal part of the society and civil society is perceiving the reaction from the EU?
Well, there is a kind of feeling in the liberal part of society in Hungary that they are being oppressed by the power, by the national TV or by the legislation. Today, for example, one opposition MP wanted to start a referendum about an issue in Hungary, but still some members of the public decided to block the entrance of the National Electoral Office, so this member of the opposition was simply not able to enter and to file his claim for a referendum to the National Election Office. So, and this is happening in the 21st century in Hungary. That
do you feel betrayed by the European Union, by EU institutions?
No, because my colleague was right. Orban is thinking in a legal framework, and if the European Commission is pointing out that this legislation is illegal, he's changing it. He's not changing the whole system. The whole system is intact, but he's changing on the point which are pointed out. For example, he changed the media law, he changed the constitution, but still the whole system is working.
And the same case was also in Poland, which Augustin said is much bigger, maybe in these terms, much more important country. We had also the Constitutional Court, we had the media law, and we kind of had a threat, let's say, from the European Union institutions that something will be done about that, but at the end everything was passed to the Venice Commission, and now we're waiting, and probably I don't know what kind of conclusion we will have. So you've mentioned institutional mechanisms. What kind of institutional mechanisms can be put on in the construct of European Union as such in these cases?
Well, I think what was done in the case of Poland was a very positive move, which should have been done in the case of Hungary. And that's why there has been, as my colleagues have said, a lack of consistency on the part of the EU in dealing with these undermining of the basic fundamental freedoms that we have taken for granted in the European Union. So there are already existing institutional mechanisms within the Lisbon Treaty, but there has never been any attempt at putting them into practice. So there has to be a credible deterrent, because if there is not a credible deterrent, other leaders will not hesitate to repeat what Orban has done, what the Polish government is doing, and also outside of the European Union, like Macedonia, where you have a regime which has been shown to be totally authoritarian. And of course, they're pointing to examples within the European Union. So there needs to be a much more consistent approach within the European Union, and there should be a credible approach and a credible response, institutional one, and the threat of taking actions such as suspending the voting rights of a member country which is seen to be disrespecting and violating the European Union.
How much the recent refugee crisis, but basically all this rise of far-right parties in Europe in general in previous years was in a way based on the issue of immigration. But how much did the last year kind of pumped it up?
I think this is misused, especially from Eastern Europe, from the countries that didn't have experience with the refugees crisis. Yes, you know, when they joined the EU, they were saying that we are going to the family where we belong because we share the same values, we are the same. Now they are saying we want you to respect the differences because we are different. We have no experience with Islam, for example, in Slovakia and Poland. So in this we have a sense of division between in a culturological lines or psychology or tradition. You know, European Union is united in diversity, how they say, but at least the fundamental values should be the same for every country. I don't think that our Polish colleagues have a less right to be on freedom of expression that we have in other countries or somebody in UK. So I think it is more misused than the real issue. In Western Europe, in older member states like in Netherlands, Germany and Austria, for example, one would understand. But why in Poland, how many refugees are there?
How do you see the tendencies basically here in Brussels on what's going on in Croatia at the moment? We have a new centre-right government. They say they're kind of more close to the V4 group as we see the current, you know, travels of our new foreign minister to Budapest, etc. And the reaction of a part of people who are working in culture as a reaction to our new culture minister in Croatia?
Oh, well, first in Brussels, I mean, they are waiting to see how the new government works, because it's very, very complex now. We have, you said, a center-right government. Yes, we could say that we have HDZ-led center-right government, but who is there? It's an opposition led by HDZ, which joined with a coalition list of independent people in the big coalition. So we have maybe 30 parties there. Okay, it is led by HDZ and it should be considered as HDZ-led government. But it is too early to say what will they do.
There is a strong opposition.
It is, and in Croatia, even if they want to do something that goes against the democratic values like control of the media, reduction of freedom of expression, and so on, there will be much bigger opposition than it is in Poland and in Hungary. Because for the moment, what is happening, it is a real polarization of the society in Croatia. But this is almost in the middle, because if you go back to the election results, the president was elected with maybe less than 1% difference. Yeah. So yes, 51% voted for her, but almost half of the population didn't. It's the same with the political parties. So they will have to be very careful not to give themselves a right to speak on behalf of the people for whatever they think.
Let's talk about Europe. Mr. Fouéré, what's the problem with EU mechanism to block this authoritarian tendency we are talking about? We remember very successful story when EU intervened to prevent the influence of extreme right in Austria in the late 90s. What's difference now from that time?
Well, the tendencies now are much greater. there are certainly more cases of attacks on basic fundamental values and fundamental freedoms that were always an integral part of the European integration project. And also the successive enlargements has increased the complexity of the issues. In 2000, this was before the Austrian case you mentioned, this was before the enlargement and the entry of 10 countries in 2004. So I think the problem has been, again, a lack of consistency. And suddenly we have now these many cases, and finally the European Commission has decided it's time really to develop a process, a policy to deal with this.
You're optimist? I mean, that...
How?
You are an optimist or not?
Well, I think we have to be much more vocal. Civil society already a strong voice, fortunately, in countries, the more established democracies and so on, but there needs to be much stronger voices.
What about the European Commission and European Council?
I think the European Commission has certainly a more vocal, more active role in this matter than in the past, and this is a positive development. The fact that they did not hesitate to launch an investigation into the Polish example is very good. And hopefully that will set a precedent for other cases that will no doubt come up. But there needs to be a much more determined defense of these democratic values. The European integration process was really distinguished by so many positive elements, not least the values, the democratic values, which made it so attractive. Also the spirit of generosity, which unfortunately has weakened a lot. And if it wasn't for Chancellor Merkel in dealing with the refugee crisis, the European Union would have lost completely that spirit of generosity which had characterized it since its foundation.
Are the two of you optimists, or European Union can crash basically within itself concerning, the social ghettos, new others coming in? We see the incidents all around the continent every day.
I think incidents are incidents, but I don't think that EU can crash or collapse or something. It's a bit exaggerated.
No, I'm not talking about crash itself, but within itself, because we see, street fights every day somewhere. New armies as Jobbik's army and
crash of the democratic values.
Yes, that's
fundamental.
But I'm more afraid from Eastern Europe than because the democracies there are fragile still, and Ambassador Fouéré mentioned the transformation during enlargement. And coming from Croatia, I could confirm that the biggest transformation power is during accession process, not after it. Now we have what is worrying is that the new generations support more and more extreme right in Eastern Europe. That's very strange. People who were not born during communism even. So I see negative tendencies there, and this is very difficult to understand, and it's dangerous to have two cultural parts of European Union. One Western part which will keep its tradition of democracy, rule of law, freedom of expression, and understand that the people in Eastern Europe don't want or don't deserve the same values. This tendency I see.
I think the problem is not the democracy, because if you see the question of defense, 80% of the Hungarian population is supporting this measure, so it's completely democratic. Also the quota issue is the same. Everybody in Hungary supports. Also the migrants don't want to go to Hungary. The Hungarian population don't want to accept them. So why is it a mandatory quota system? That's one point. The second point is we see from the Eastern European part a so-called double standards in Europe, which is in many cases applied. for Central European countries. For example, why has United Kingdom opt out from applying the quota system, and why not Hungary cannot get the same? It's a question that nobody is able to answer to Hungarians. So I don't think what we see in Hungary is not a question of democratic principles, because everything is democratic. Orban won all the elections and it was fair. The question is more about the rule of law and more about the values that the people think we should follow. And it's a question of if there would be a change, we need to wait for it at least 10 years to have a new generation which is thinking in another way, in a more liberal way.
Or a more radical way.
Or a more radical way, but I don't think that anyone outside of Hungary can impose anything to this country.
How credible is EU in the Hungary?
I'm sorry?
In the Hungarian. How credible EU is in the Hungarian society?
There are growing number of EU skeptical population. Many people are thinking that EU is not heading to the right direction with these migration policies, with the policies of the open borders, and especially with the policies of Angela Merkel. Many Hungarians are dissatisfied with the Germans' so-called Willkommenskultur, and they think that, okay, if they invite people to Germany, that's okay, but don't impose these people to us to accept them.
But I think this is where the leaders should respond. I mean, this is clearly historical amnesia when you remember that
Right.
all of these countries, all of us were refugees at one time in the past. And therefore, to see the reaction from some governments against the refugees, putting up walls, distinguishing between Muslim and Christian and all of that, this really casts a very negative image of the European Union.
But this refugee crisis has nothing to do with the refugee issues of the 20th century, because it's completely different. What happened, for example, in Hungary in '56 after the revolution, that 200,000 people went to Austria. And then the Austrians could calculate that, okay, it's more or less 100 or 200 people are coming from Hungary. We know them more or less, who they are, what they want. But now nobody can predict the size of the migration wave. Nobody can tell us if it's 5 million or 10 million who will come. And they are not going only to the next country, to Turkey. They take 2,000 kilometers to get here, and I think it's an issue that the European leaders, I'm not saying that they don't understand it well, but the response, they are late with the response.
And very uncoordinated.
Very uncoordinated, that's the good word.
So are we going to expect the Europe of more freedom or less freedom, concerning that, you know, the borders and the defense of the borders is more or less the top thing on the agenda? And my second question, maybe to wrap it up, how Brexit will basically, at the end, reflect and influence the future of the EU?
Yes, well, the whole Brexit debate is unfortunate addition to all the other crises that we're having, and it's very sad. But anyway, let's hope that the result in the referendum in the UK will be positive, or at least that the debate will be rational and not an emotional one, which unfortunately it has become. And the decision may be an emotional one rather than an irrational one in the UK. But certainly in the case of the European Union, the tendencies are very negative with regard to maintaining one of these founding principles of open borders, etc. So we need to, there has to be a strong effort to fight back against that and to preserve, as President Juncker has said many times, to preserve what is so special and unique about the European Union since its creation. And so it means really using all the forces at the disposal, civil society playing a critical role in this respect, and also the European Parliament, which unfortunately we've seen a number of party factions that have been really undermining and very weak, such as the European
Very
People's
short
Party.
because
Wrap
we
it up,
have to.
yeah.
What's your forecast for the future of the EU? Stronger after such a crisis, of the refugee crisis, democratic value crisis. Are we going to see some lessons learned and to have a stronger Europe, or we are going to witnessing the fall of EU?
And you said we have to step up the effort. Who is we? If nation states are behaving one way and Commission says who is we, who to step the effort, please.
Very short.
I think that first of all, it's member states who decide what the Commission does, more or less. But and on Brexit, I think that it's a crisis in EU that can affect Brexit referendum in UK more than referendum can affect European Union. But in general, I think that we are going to see, unfortunately, weaker European Union because not because it's big, but because many issues it seems it's more practical to resolve individually, some member states together, but not at EU level, in order to avoid bureaucracy and long procedures. Because the issues are urgent and they cannot wait for the long procedures in EU.
I think Europe won't fall apart, but will be weaker and go down slowly. We will see probably a more fragmented Schengen system. Maybe some countries will leave or be being pushed out from Schengen. And probably we already see a two-speed Europe. The European leaders have to accept that the diversities apply, and if they don't do this, it will go down.
Thank you so much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching Balkans in Europe program. As Ambassador Fouéré said, please don't suffer from historical amnesia. Try to think about the future. Thank you for being with us today.
Pozdrav.